everybody, I'm here with Tom this week.
Hello.
And we started a new 3-week series all about hope from different perspectives. Why is it important to talk about hope? Hope helps us to overcome fear and it gives us strength to do things, and it's important to know what hope is for us and what it means for us so that we can go on to do greater things with God. Maybe you're looking for a bit of hope right now because you're about to start school or college, or you haven't got the exam grades that you wanted. Maybe you're still a bit uncertain about the whole coronavirus situation or the way that the world is right now. We all need a bit of hope. So it's important that you tune into these videos and let's learn about what hope means for us. So this week we're going to look at a Bible story, and we're going to look at the story of Gideon. Gideon was a small young boy who was an Israelite, and God did great things through him. His story is found in the Old Testament in Judges, and it's chapters 6, 7 and 8, but we're going to summarise them all for you, and we're going to give a brief overview, but there are more details to it, so you might want to go and read them for yourself. So Tom's going to start off by setting the scene for us.
Cool. So we all know the story of the Israelites being brought out of Egypt by Moses and all that sort of story. This follows on after all that, and it's basically easiest way to begin the story is the fact that Israel actually fell into sin. So they started worshipping false gods and idols and everything, which was seen as sinful in them days, as well, they still are. So as retaliation for that, God actually left them in the hands of the Midianites for, it says in the Bible, for 7 years. And throughout that, and towards the end of that, the Israelites actually finally called out to God for help when they realised that they did wrong and they needed to get back on track.
So that's the scene, and then when Gideon comes into it, an angel appears to Gideon and tells him that he is going to deliver the Israelites from the Midianites. Now the Midianites were oppressive and destructive people, and Gideon was just a small boy. But this angel, who is speaking on behalf of God, says that Gideon is a mighty warrior. He calls him a mighty warrior. And Gideon says, no, my family is the least in the clan, and I am the least in my family. I'm just a small boy. I'm nothing special. And he needed a lot of reassurance from God that God was going to be with him. But Gideon was fully faithful to God, and he did everything that God asked him to, whether it was a little thing or a big thing. So even though he needed reassurance, he still went for it. And God did reassure Gideon, and Gideon asked for signs, and God did all of those signs for him. Now, one of the things that Gideon had to do was to get together an army of Israelites to go and defeat the Midianites. And he got together a lot of men, but God told him in different ways, you need to cut down your army, because if you have a huge army against the Midianites, then you're not going to see my hand in that. But if you have a small army, you're going to know that I'm with you, because the odds will be against you. And so in the end, Gideon had an army of 300 men. Now these men were just farmers and shepherds. They weren't fighters, they weren't particularly trained in fighting. But so he had 300 men against 135,000 Midianite troops.
Yeah, so a bit further on from that, Gideon actually overheard two Midianites talking about a dream that one of them had experienced. And that dream was actually interpreted to mean that Gideon and the Israelites would actually destroy the camp of Midian. So further on from the dream, this actually happened. As we know in the Bible, everything that is interpreted out of dreams, they all come to reality because it's what God's planned. So the reality that happened was that Gideon, after forming an army of 300 men, he split them into 3 groups, of which placed themselves around the camp, so they were fully surrounding the camp of the Midianites. And a weird thing was that each man in the army actually had a horn or a trumpet, and when the time was right, they made a great noise together, all at once, all together, and shouted. And the Bible states that they shouted, "The sword of the Lord and of Gideon," but they actually didn't attack them, which is a weird thing to think about. But the really weird thing and a kind of encouraging thing is that the Midianites awoke after the great noise happened. They awoke with fear, and God caused them to fight each other. So they turned on each other and not to the Israelites, and they fled. So the Israelites didn't really have to fight them in a sense. They actually turned on themselves because they realized that the dream that was interpreted was actually happening, coming to reality, and they were scared of that and they wanted to get out of that. So they were turning on everybody, trying to get out of it, and it just caused chaos. So they fled away, and they were actually later on pursued by the Israelites from other areas and other tribes of Israel. They were struck down, they were defeated.
So that's kind of the story of Gideon in a very brief overview. There's a lot more details, as we said. But how does this story show hope to us? What can we take away from this? So first of all, it shows that God has given everybody, every single person, whether you're a somebody or a nobody, whether you're extraordinary or ordinary, He's given everybody a powerful potential to do great and unpredictable things. We need to be willing to follow God and put our trust in Him, and God can do amazing things through us. Just like Gideon was just a small boy, he led an army of 300 farmers and shepherds to defeat a vast and trained army of 135,000 Midianite leaders, soldiers.
A bit similar to that is that God works in many different ways, as we all get told all the time. He works in so many different ways that we cannot actually imagine many of them. But a little bit of trust in God can uncover absolutely amazing, incredible, unthinkable testimonies.
Yeah. And also, hope goes hand in hand with courage. So often, if you've got a bit of courage, you've got a bit of hope, because hope is expecting good things. So you need hope to drive you to even start to do things. And hope gives us the confidence to carry out God's will when things seem actually, God, that I don't feel like I can do that. God, I don't think I'm strong enough to do that. God's hope in you and your hope in God encourages you to do that.
Just a little final point. I find it kind of funny saying this sort of thing, but if you think about how many men there were with Gideon, so there were 300 men, and they were against 135,000 Midianites. So that works out at one man versus 450 enemies. I just imagine this little measly guy surrounded by 450 warriors. Bearing in mind that guy's like a farmer or something like that. He's not really a warrior, and he's surrounded by all these people. And God's saying that they're gonna win. Obviously, later on, it presents itself into a different sort of way, and God shows that His plan, it works. But when you think about 300 men versus 335,000, you think of an actual war, an actual battle, but what actually happened with the trumpet sounds and everything, you just don't think about. So that's quite encouraging that God works in so many weird, amazing ways.
Plus, Gideon probably didn't know that that's how that battle was how he was gonna triumph in that. God probably wouldn't have told him all the details. Oh, you're gonna blow a trumpet and the Midianites will just start fighting each other. He might have known, he might not have known. But it's weird. But there are so many stories of hope in the Bible. The Bible is filled with hope. And we've just got a few examples for you. So who would think that Jonah would survive being in the big fish for all the days that he was in it? Who would think that a small boy called David would defeat a giant warrior called Goliath and would become king?
Who would think that the Israelites would finally make it to the promised land after 40 years of being lost in the desert? Who would think that God would forgive all the sins of man after all the wrong that we've done?
Who would think that any of the disciples would play major parts in building the start of Christianity? Who would think that the floods would finally recede after about 150 days of Noah floating around on the ark?
Who would think that Sarah, so Sarah's Abraham's wife, who would think that Sarah in old age, in very old age, would actually give birth to a son? Who would think that Mary, a virgin, would give birth to the actual Son of God?
Who would think that Peter would have walked on water? Who would think that Daniel would have survived being in the lion's den overnight?
So just a question that popped into my mind when I was thinking about this was, why does the Bible show us so much hope? The Bible is full of hope. Every story you can see something in it to do with hope. And just a couple of points that we've pulled out is that without hope, there is nothing that makes us strive to do what we think is impossible. But it is actually possible with God.
Also, if we don't put our hope and our trust in God, then we don't know what we could become. We don't know what God's got in store for us. Whereas if we put our hope in God, He will build us up and He will work through us. And that's what God wants for us. That's why He shows us hope.
God knows what will happen. No matter what, God knows what will happen because it's His plan. Creation was His design and everything in it. And God knows exactly what's going to happen. So it would be foolish not to follow His guidance and trust with everything that He puts on us.
The Bible constantly encourages us to put our trust in God and to rely on His power and His provision and to expect great things from Him. God expects great things from us and we expect great things from Him. So we've said hope is to expect good to happen, and God is good, and God will bring good out of bad situations, and that is throughout the whole Bible. God brings good.
Yeah, so I think we'll leave it there for this video. I know it's not been super detailed, but we can go into more detail on Friday. But just a question that I want to put to you is, do you have a story of hope, and are you willing to share it on Friday? Because it's really encouraging to hear other people's stories. If it's a hopeful story that has actually happened and come out really positively, it can encourage other people. So it's really important that we're open to share what we can with each other to encourage each other.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll leave it there, and I hope that this video has really encouraged everybody who watches this, and feel free to bring any questions to the Friday discussion, and also have a look at this story for yourself. It's in Judges 6, 7 and 8 as well, but just have a look at this story in more detail. It's really encouraging. So I hope you all have a really great week, and we'll see you on Friday to talk about hope.
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 Hope. Cool. So we'll leave it there, guys, and see you on Friday.
Bye.
See you later.